Sani waved his colleagues goodnight as he guided his old Toyota down the familiar roads of Kaduna towards home. He loved this part of the day, the moment when work faded into the background, and he returned to the warm embrace of his home. As he pulled into the narrow driveway of his well-maintained bungalow, a wave of pride washed over him. He had built this life brick by brick, not with shortcuts or shady deals, but through sheer hard work and integrity. Habiba was waiting for him at the door, her radiant smile lighting up the porch. Her caramel skin glowed in the soft evening light, and the colorful Ankara dress she wore hugged her slender frame perfectly. She had always been the kind of woman who turned heads effortlessly, but what Sani loved most was the gentle kindness that lay beneath her beauty. "You're back early," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I wanted to beat the traffic," Sani replied, setting his briefcase down. "And I missed you." Habiba laughed softly, a sound that reminded him of birdsong. Always the sweet talker. "Go wash up. Dinner's almost ready." As Sani washed his hands in the small but pristine kitchen sink, he couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He knew people whispered about their childlessness. Neighbors often cast pitying glances at Habiba, and even some relatives subtly suggested he try harder or consider other options. But none of it mattered to Sani. Habiba was enough. They sat together at the dining table, sharing a simple but delicious meal of jollof rice and grilled chicken. The air was filled with the aroma of spices and the soft melody of a Hausa love song playing from the radio. "How was work?" Habiba asked between bites. "Busy," Sani said, sipping water. "The Abuja transfer is still being discussed. They want me to oversee administrative duties and internal audits there." "Abuja?" Habiba's brows furrowed. "That's far." "It's a temporary assignment," Sani reassured her. 6 months, maybe a year. "Ali's going too." Habiba's lips curved into a faint smile. "Ali, the smooth talker. He always makes me laugh." Sani chuckled. "That's Ali for you." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics. Habiba's plans for expanding her small eatery, the latest gossip from the neighborhood, and dreams of traveling one day when life allowed it. After dinner, Sani helped clear the table despite Habiba's protests. "You work all day, and now you want to do dishes," she teased. "I don't mind," he said softly. "We're a team, remember?" Later, as they sat on the porch watching the stars blink into existence, Habiba leaned her head against Sani's shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "people say a marriage without children is incomplete, but I don't feel incomplete with you." Sani's throat tightened. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Neither do I. You're my everything, Habiba." In that moment, beneath the vast Nigerian sky, everything felt perfect. But life, as Sani would soon learn, had a cruel way of unraveling even the most beautiful of tapestries. The morning air in Kaduna was crisp and filled with the scent of dew-soaked grass. Sani stood by the trunk of his Toyota, carefully arranging the last of his bags as Habiba hovered nearby, her expression masked with unease. "You don't have to go," she said quietly, her voice strained. "Why can't someone else take the transfer?" Sani turned to her, offering a reassuring smile. "You know it's not just about me. It's a promotion, Habiba. The board trusts me to get this right. Besides, Ali and I will be handling it together. It'll be fine." Habiba bit her lip, clearly unconvinced. "I just have a bad feeling about this." "I promise I'll come home every weekend," Sani said gently, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "And we'll get through this, like we always do." With a reluctant nod, Habiba stepped back as Sani closed the trunk and slid into the driver's seat. "I'll miss you," she whispered. "I'll miss you more," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. The drive to Abuja was long but scenic, with vast stretches of savanna rolling into view beneath a cloudless sky. Sani's thoughts drifted to his responsibilities at the new branch. The move was a significant career milestone, but it also came with pressure. The Abuja office had recently faced scrutiny over operational inefficiencies, and the board expected Sani to clean things up. Ali's voice crackled through the car speakers as Sani answered his call. "Are you on the road?" Ali asked cheerfully. "Yeah, just passing through Zuba," Sani replied. Good. Don't stress too much about this transfer, my guy. Abuja's got its perks. Better nightlife. More opportunities. You'll see. Sani laughed softly. I'm here for work, not a vacation. That's where you're wrong, Ali quipped. Life is all about balance. Work hard, but don't forget to enjoy yourself. By the time Sani reached Abuja, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting the city in hues of amber and rose. The office building loomed ahead, sleek and modern, a testament to the bank's prestigious reputation. Inside, the atmosphere was markedly different from the disciplined environment Sani had cultivated back in Kaduna. Staff members moved with a casualness that bordered on indifference. The receptionist barely glanced up as Sani and Ali entered. Welcome to chaos, Ali joked, clapping Sani on the back. They were ushered into a conference room where the branch manager, a portly man with a gruff demeanor named Mr. Alhaji Musa, waited with a team of senior staff. Ah, the saviors from Kaduna. Musa boomed, rising to shake their hands. We've heard great things about you, Sani. Very diligent. Very honest. Sani detected a hint of mockery beneath the man's words, but chose to ignore it. I'm here to ensure we run a clean and efficient operation, he said firmly. Musa's lips twitched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Clean? Well, good luck with that. The meeting was brief but tense. Sani took mental notes of the glaring administrative gaps, while Ali made small talk with the staff. Afterward, Musa pulled Sani aside. Word of advice, Musa said, his tone lowering. Things in Abuja operate differently. You'll need to adapt. I'm here to do things by the book, Sani replied coolly. Musa chuckled. The book, Let's see how long that lasts. That night, as Sani settled into his modest hotel room, he replayed the day's events in his mind. Something was off about this branch. The lax attitudes, the veiled warnings, Musa's cryptic remarks. But Sani was determined to stay true to his principles. The next morning, he arrived at the office early, ready to dive into the internal audit. Ali sauntered in late, a coffee in hand. Man, you need to relax, Ali said, dropping into the chair beside Sani. This isn't Kaduna. People here move differently. I noticed, Sani replied, eyes fixed on his computer screen. You'll get used to it, Ali said with a grin. Or not. Sani's frown deepened as he sifted through account records. Discrepancies began to emerge, small at first, but consistent. Transactions that didn't align, dormant accounts suddenly active with large sums of money moving in and out. A cold knot formed in his stomach. This was more than just poor bookkeeping. Ali glanced at him. What's that look for? There's something wrong with these accounts, Sani said, his voice low. Ali leaned over, his expression shifting to one of mild amusement. Oh, that? Don't stress yourself. It's just how things are done here. What do you mean? Ali shrugged. Look, junior staff hustle a bit on the side. Nobody gets hurt. Just let it go, my guy. You'll live longer. Sani's jaw tightened. That's fraud. Ali's smile faded. It's survival. Sani leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. He knew this assignment would be challenging, but he hadn't expected to face corruption so blatant, and so accepted. The line had been drawn, and Sani was already standing on the wrong side of it. The soft hum of air conditioning filled the office as Sani sat at his desk, staring at the endless rows of numbers on his screen. He had always found comfort in the precision of banking. Every figure had its place, every transaction a purpose. But today, that sense of order was unraveling before his eyes. The discrepancies were no longer subtle. They were glaring red flags. Dormant accounts were being activated without legitimate customer authorizations, large sums funneled through obscure channels, and withdrawals that made no sense. Sani rubbed his temples, fighting off a growing headache. The weight of what he was uncovering pressed heavily on his chest. He had seen minor financial irregularities before, honest mistakes or occasional oversight. But this was deliberate and systemic. A knock on the door broke his concentration. Come in, Sani called, his voice strained. Ali strolled in, his ever-present grin plastered across his face. Still at it? Ali, Sani said, gesturing to the screen. There's something very wrong here. Ali leaned over, scanning the data with mild interest. Ah, You're looking at those domicile accounts, right? Yes, Sani said sharply. They're being used to funnel money. This isn't just poor management, it's laundering. Ali shrugged, sinking into the chair opposite Sani. Look, Sani, you've got to understand something about Abuja. People here hustle. It's survival. These junior staff you're worried about? They're just trying to make a living. Let it go, man. Sani's expression hardened. Are you telling me you knew about this? Ali's smile faltered for a brief moment before he regained his composure. I didn't say that. But honestly, what difference does it make? No one's getting hurt, and everyone gets their cut. Sani felt a surge of anger. You're okay with this? I'm okay with surviving, Ali said evenly. You should be too. Sani stood, pacing the room. I can't just ignore this. We're talking about people's hard-earned money being moved without their knowledge. This is fraud. Ali sighed, standing up and patting Sani's shoulder. Do yourself a favor, my guy. Mind your business. These junior staff? They'll bring you your share if you just play along. I don't want their money, Sani said coldly. Well, you're the only one in this branch who feels that way, Ali said with a chuckle. Good luck with that. After Ali left, Sani sat back down, his resolve hardening. He knew what he had to do. The next day, Sani summoned the junior staff implicated in the irregular transactions to his office. They filed in, their expressions ranging from nervous to defiant. You all know why you're here, Sani began, his voice firm. These transactions are illegal. This stops now. One of the staff members, a cocky young man named Jide, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Oga, that's how things are done here. You knew people always come with big talk until you realize this is Nigeria. Relax, sir. Take your cut when we bring it. The audacity left Sani momentarily speechless. Do you hear yourself? He finally said, disbelief lacing his tone. This is fraud, and it's going to stop. Jide snorted. Good luck with that. Sani dismissed them, his stomach churning with frustration. How had things gotten this bad? He knew corruption existed, but the blatant acceptance of it was staggering. That evening, Sani sat with his wife, Habiba, in their modest hotel room. She had traveled down to Abuja to spend a few days with him, sensing his growing stress. You look troubled, she said, pouring him a cup of zobo. Sani sighed heavily. There's corruption in the office. Serious corruption. And when I reported it, I was told to ignore it, or join in. Habiba's brows knitted together in concern. Sani, please listen to me. You've always been a man of integrity, and I love that about you. But sometimes, doing the right thing isn't worth the cost. Sani stared at her, stunned. You're telling me to turn a blind eye? I'm telling you to protect yourself, Habiba said firmly. We have a life to protect, Sani. Don't let their mess become your downfall. Her words lingered in the air long after she had gone to bed. Sani sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. How had everyone become so comfortable with wrong? The following morning, Sani made his decision. He couldn't ignore the corruption any longer. If the bank wouldn't act, then he would. At exactly noon, Sani made a discreet call to the Financial Crimes Commission. He reported everything, names, accounts, and transactions. You're doing the right thing, the officer on the other end said. We'll handle it from here. Relief washed over Sani as he hung up. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. The Abuja office hummed with its usual indifference the following Monday morning. Sani sat at his desk, trying to focus on routine tasks despite the weight of his decision. He had done the right thing by contacting the Financial Crimes Commission, FCC, yet unease gnawed at his insides. He reminded himself why he took the risk: justice, accountability, and the protection of innocent customers who trusted the bank with their livelihoods. Ali strode into the office with his signature confident swagger. Good morning, my guy, he greeted, slapping Sani on the back. Morning, Sani replied flatly, avoiding eye contact. Ali narrowed his eyes. You okay? You look like someone who just snitched on the whole bank. Sani stiffened. Just work stress. Ali chuckled. You need to loosen up, man. Sani forced a tight smile. The irony of Ali's words stung. He had indeed snitched, but for a cause greater than himself. Later that day, The sound of authoritative voices echoed down the hallway. Sani looked up from his desk to see a group of FCC officers entering the branch manager's office. Their crisp suits and stern expressions immediately shifted the atmosphere from casual indifference to palpable tension. Sani's heart raced with a mix of anticipation and relief. They were here. Action was finally being taken. 15 minutes later, the branch manager, Mr. Musa, emerged from his office, his face flushed with rage. His eyes briefly met Sani's, and something cold and dangerous flickered in them before he stormed away with the FCC officers. The office buzzed with speculation. "What's happening?" one staff member whispered. "Is Musa in trouble?" another asked, wide-eyed. Sani remained silent, his mind focused on the hope that justice would finally prevail. By late afternoon, Sani was summoned to the office of the regional director, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Evelyn Adebayo. He walked in with confidence, expecting a commendation for his integrity. To his shock, seated alongside Mrs. Adebayo were two FCC officers with grim expressions. "Mr. Sani," she began coldly, "do you know why you're here?" "Yes, ma'am," Sani said, trying to maintain his composure. "I reported ongoing financial crimes in this branch." Mrs. Adebayo's lips pressed into a thin line. "Interesting. Because the FCC is here to investigate you." Sani blinked, unable to process her words. "What? That's impossible." One of the officers cut him off, slapping a folder onto the table. "These documents show your signature authorizing fraudulent transactions over the past 6 months. There are also allegations of you selling sensitive customer information to third parties." Sani's world tilted on its axis. "This is a lie," he exclaimed. "I didn't sign those documents." The officer's expression remained impassive. "The evidence says otherwise." Sani's pulse thundered in his ears. He recognized the documents, the accounts he had flagged as suspicious, but his signature had been forged. "This is a setup," he said urgently. "Someone is framing me." Mrs. Adebayo leaned back in her chair, her gaze icy. "Do you have any proof to back that claim?" Sani opened his mouth to speak, but realized he had none. The very people he had trusted to uphold the law were now using it against him. "You're coming with us," the officer said, standing up. Sani felt his hands being cuffed as humiliation and disbelief coursed through him. He looked desperately at Mrs. Adebayo. "Ma'am, please, I've only ever done what's right." "I hope you enjoy explaining that in court," she said curtly. The cold, damp air of the holding cell pressed in on Sani like a physical weight. He sat on the rough concrete floor, his head in his hands. The accusations against him played on a loop in his mind, each false claim cutting deeper than the last. By nightfall, Habiba arrived at the station, her face tear-streaked and pale. "Oh, Sani," she whispered as she saw him through the bars. "I didn't do it," he said hoarsely. "I know," she said, though her voice wavered. "I warned you. I told you to leave it alone." "I couldn't, Habiba. I couldn't be part of that filth." "And now look at you," she said bitterly. "They've taken everything. You've lost your job, your reputation. What do we have left?" Her words stung, but Sani couldn't argue. The next morning, after hours of interrogation and humiliation, Sani was released on bail. The bank had frozen all his accounts, and the house he had worked so hard to build was seized. With the little money left in Habiba's account, she managed to rent a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town. The gleaming life they had built together was gone, replaced by uncertainty and despair. Sani sat in the dingy living room, the ceiling fan creaking above him. Habiba moved around the kitchen, her movements sharp and angry. "You should have listened to me," she said, slamming a pot onto the stove. "Now we're here, living like beggars." "I did what I thought was right," Sani said quietly. "And where did that get us?" she spat. Sani had no answer. The weight of his failure pressed heavily on his chest. As the days turned into weeks, Habiba's resentment grew. She became the breadwinner, using the income from her small eatery to support them. But with every naira she spent, her bitterness deepened. Little by little, the love and respect that had once defined their marriage eroded. Sani tried to help at the shop, but Habiba's scornful remarks cut through him like knives. "Don't touch that," she snapped one afternoon. "You'll just mess it up." "I'm only trying to help," he said quietly. "Well, maybe if you hadn't ruined our lives, I wouldn't need your help," she retorted. Her staff exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to intervene. Sani swallowed his pride and said nothing. But the worst was yet to come. The morning air in their cramped apartment was thick with tension. Sani sat on the edge of the worn couch, staring at the faded wall as Habiba prepared to leave for her shop. Her movements were quick and sharp. Each clanging pot and slammed drawer a reminder of her simmering anger. "You're just going to sit there all day, right?" she asked, her voice laced with contempt. Sani's jaw tightened. "I've been applying for jobs, Habiba. You know that." She laughed bitterly, adjusting her headscarf in front of the cracked mirror near the door. "Jobs? Who's going to hire a man accused of fraud? You're a disgrace." The words cut deep, but Sani bit his tongue. There was no point arguing. Habiba had become someone he barely recognized, a woman hardened by disappointment and resentment. "I'll come to the shop later to help," he offered quietly. "Don't bother," she snapped. "Just stay out of my way." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Sani exhaled slowly, trying to steady the turmoil inside him. By midday, he decided to go to the market. It had been years since he last shopped for food, but today felt different. He wanted to do something, anything, to rekindle the warmth that had once existed between them. With the few naira he had left, he bought vegetables, spices, and a small cut of meat. As he made his way back, he passed by Habiba's eatery. The place was bustling with customers, the aroma of freshly cooked meals wafting through the air. He paused, watching her from a distance. She was vibrant, laughing with a customer. A man who leaned a little too close. Sani clenched his fists, but forced himself to look away. She had every right to be angry with him, didn't she? That evening, Sani prepared a meal with care, hoping it would mend even a fraction of the rift between them. The aroma filled the small apartment as he set the table, waiting for Habiba to return. When she finally walked in, her expression was weary and cold. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing the neatly set table. "Dinner," Sani said softly. You thought cooking one meal would fix everything," she interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think food will make me forget what you've done to us?" "Habiba, please," Sani implored. "I'm trying," she scoffed, brushing past him. "Try harder." The days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew worse. Habiba's success at the shop contrasted starkly with Sani's descent into obscurity. Her confidence blossomed while his dignity withered. One afternoon, as he sat in the corner of the shop washing plates, a group of customers whispered and laughed. "Is that her husband?" one man asked, loud enough for Sani to hear. "Yes," another chuckled. "He looks more like a servant." Sani's ears burned, but he kept scrubbing the plates. Habiba, standing nearby, made no effort to defend him. Instead, she laughed along with the customers, a sound that pierced Sani's heart. When the last customer left, Sani stood up, water dripping from his hands. "Why would you let them speak to me like that?" he asked quietly. "Why not?" Habiba shot back. "You've made yourself a joke. Might as well let everyone laugh." "I'm still your husband," Sani said, his voice shaking. "Are you?" she challenged, stepping closer. "Because all I see is a man who couldn't protect his family. A man who dragged us into this mess." Sani felt something inside him snap, but he swallowed his pride. "I'll leave if that's what you want." Habiba's eyes flickered with surprise, but she quickly masked it with indifference. "Do whatever you want." The breaking point came 2 days later. A customer complained about a dirty plate, prompting Habiba to erupt in a fit of rage. "You can't even wash plates properly," she shouted, grabbing a bucket of dirty water. Before Sani could react, she flung the water at him, drenching him from head to toe. The shop fell silent, staff and customers frozen in shock. Sani stood there, humiliated beyond words, water dripping from his clothes. He wanted to scream, to fight back, but all he could do was turn and walk away. He walked for what felt like hours, his mind numb. The streets blurred around him as he replayed the scene over and over in his head. He had lost everything. his job, his home, his dignity, and now even the respect of the woman he loved. As he wandered aimlessly, he saw a familiar face. Dr. Yusuf, the fertility specialist who had treated him and Habiba for years. Sani, the doctor called out, waving. Sani forced a smile and approached him. It's been a while, Dr. Yusuf said warmly. How are you? And how's Habiba? We're managing, Sani said quietly. The doctor's face lit up. Congratulations again on her pregnancy. I told her to keep coming for checkups. Sani froze. Pregnancy? Yes, Dr. Yusuf said cheerfully. She didn't tell you? Sani's mind raced. Habiba was pregnant? After all these years? He should have felt joy, but confusion and suspicion clouded his thoughts. Why hadn't she told him? Thank you, he managed to say before walking away. The revelation left Sani both elated and uneasy. Maybe Habiba's erratic behavior was due to hormones. Perhaps this child would be the fresh start they needed. Fueled by a strange sense of hope, Sani decided to surprise her. He used the last of his money to buy ingredients for her favorite meal, determined to make peace. As he made his way back, he took a shortcut through a quiet residential street. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pavement. That was when he saw them. In front of a beautiful apartment, Habiba stood with Ali. They were laughing, their bodies close. Then, to Sani's horror, Ali leaned in and kissed her, and she didn't pull away. Sani's world shattered. They didn't see him. He turned and started running, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The weight of betrayal crushed his chest. He kept running, tears blinding his vision, until he reached the edge of the bridge that loomed over the city. The cars below looked like distant blurs, the wind whipping around him. Sani took a step closer to the edge, his heart pounding violently. This was it. Everything he had fought for was gone. Everything he loved had betrayed him. He saw a bridge in front of him, and thought, maybe, just maybe, it was time to let it all go.